Okay, so when you think of Spain, what comes to mind? Sunny beaches, right? Amazing food, vibrant culture. But what if I told you that behind that postcard image, there's a whole other world, a shadow world of crime, corruption, and impunity that's hiding in plain sight? That's what we're digging into today.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with how Spain turned into a criminal hub. Then we'll get into the politics that let it all happen, and this culture of silence. After that, we'll link it all to extremism and organized crime, and you'll see how it all feeds into one big, vicious cycle.
All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, a criminal hub. And the subtitle says it all, behind the postcards. Because we're about to look at a fact that, well, it pretty much shatters that vacation fantasy.
So, behind that sunny exterior, Spain has a serious appetite for cocaine. I mean, we're talking one of the top consumers in the world, right up there with the UK and Australia. And all that demand, it creates this massive, illicit market that doesn't just stop at Spain's borders. It goes way beyond. And listen, this isn't just some fringe theory. This comes from Roberto Saviano, an author who has literally put his life on the line to expose the Italian mafias. He puts it bluntly. He's not just saying these groups operate in Spain, he's saying they use it as their HQ, their command and control center to manage the flood of drugs coming in from Latin America to the rest of the continent.
So that brings up a huge question. How on earth can they operate so openly? Well, a really shocking theory called the unwritten pact. The idea here is that there's this informal, unspoken arrangement between organized crime and certain powerful people within the state.
And the supposed deal is brutally simple. The mafias? They get to run their drug businesses, they get to launder billions of euros, often through all that coastal real estate. But they have to follow one golden rule. No public violence. No blood crimes. Don't do anything that causes a panic, grabs headlines, and forces the politicians and police to actually crack down. Basically, keep the peace and you can keep your profits.
And where does all that cash go? Well, it goes right back into the legitimate economy. This illicit money is what's fueling huge developments along Spain's Mediterranean coast, propping up massive industries like real estate and tourism. The dirty money literally becomes clean bricks and mortar.
So you got to be asking yourself, how does a criminal enterprise this huge operate so openly? Well, the answer isn't really on the streets. It's in the halls of power, which brings us to the politics of impunity and how the system is basically built to protect itself.
Let's look at a case that really set the stage for all this, the Naseiro case back in 1990. So, police are doing a drug investigation and they accidentally catch a top politician on tape. You think that's it, right? Case closed. Nope. The Supreme Court steps in and throws out the recordings on a technicality. Just like that, the evidence disappears. The party looks clean. And then years later, that exact same party goes on to break every corruption record in the book. The precedent was set right there.
And this right here, this is the line they tried to erase from history. I'm in politics to get rich. A straight-up confession caught on a wiretap and then buried by the highest court in the country. All to protect a political party on the rise. And yeah, you guessed it, that's the same party that would later become infamous for corruption.
Now, don't think this is just some old story from the history books. This pattern, this culture of impunity, has had very real, very modern consequences, especially on Spain's famous sunny coasts.
I mean, just look at the Malaya scandal in Marbella. It was huge. It blew the lid off a direct pipeline between city hall corruption and violent Eastern European mafias. And the pattern just keeps going. The current leader of that very same political party, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, was famously snapped on a yacht with a known drug trafficker. The pictures are right there. But despite the evidence, the consequences, they just never seem to stick. Okay, so this isn't just a political problem. That same idea of impunity, of getting away with it, seeps into other really powerful institutions. And what it creates is this widespread culture of silence, where the people in charge just look the other way.
And now, let's talk about one of the most protected institutions in the entire country, the Spanish Catholic Church.
And the pederasty crisis in the Catholic Church is presented as a prime example.
And it was journalists, digging deep, who really blew the lid off this thing. The newspaper El País wasn't just reporting on rumors, they were documenting thousands of specific individual, harrowing stories of abuse inside the church.
So, let's start with a single number, 440,000. Just look at that for a second. What on earth could a number that huge possibly represent?
I mean, it's not the budget for a new stadium. And it's not the population of some city you've never heard of. Nope. The reality behind this number is, well, it's pretty shocking, and it comes directly from an official government source.
That's right, 440,000. That's the estimated number of people in Spain who have been victims of abuse by the clergy. This is according to a 2023 report from the Spanish Ombudsman's Office. Think about that for a moment. It's a number that's just impossible to square with that sunny, welcoming image of the country. And as unbelievable as that number is, the report makes it clear it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Because that very same report estimates that the number of victims of pedophilia in the general population is a staggering 4 million. The clerical abuse is a horror story on its own, for sure, but this chart just lays it bare. It's part of a much, much bigger systemic problem.
Now, some have fiercely denied these numbers, which are based on statistical sampling.
This isn't some wild exaggeration. It's tragically in line with what we've seen in other Western countries. And this slide really shows you the two different worlds, right? On one side, you have a government body putting out this massive, devastating number. And on the other side, the church's response was to hire a law firm to do an internal audit. A firm, it's worth noting, that's headed by a well-known member of Opus Dei, which of course raises all sorts of questions about just how independent that investigation could really be.
I mean, it gets even crazier. We're talking about active sabotage here. Also an Opus Dei member actually admitted he invented a fake story of abuse, all in a deliberate effort to undermine the credibility of the journalists who were breaking the real story.
So how does this alleged impunity actually work in practice? The Romano case is held up as a prime example. Here's how it went down. A priest is accused of abuse. But then the key witness, who himself is a member of the ultra-conservative group Opus Dei, suddenly retracts his testimony. Just like that, the priest is acquitted. But the story takes an even more surreal turn when Pope Francis, who had initially supported the victim, reportedly calls the acquitted priest to apologize.
And this leads us to one of the most explosive allegations. It's a claim about the immense influence of that same conservative group, Opus Dei, right at the very heart of the Spanish justice system.
And get this, that claim doesn't come from just anywhere. It comes from a sitting Spanish judge, Santiago Vidal. He's the one who alleged that a single, highly conservative religious organization makes up 1/3 of the entire judiciary. Just let that sink in for a moment. Imagine the potential for ideological influence over legal outcomes. What happens when the exact systems designed to protect people are instead used to deny them justice?
Well, that's where this term comes in, the wall of impunity. It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? It's used to describe this alleged network of institutions, we're talking political, judicial, and religious, that supposedly work together to shield powerful figures from any accountability.
But you know, sometimes that violent reality becomes impossible to keep hidden. Let's jump to our case study and see what went down in the province of Almeria, where this underworld just erupted right out into the open.
To really get this story, you first have to understand Almeria, the most fascist province in the entire country. It's a place with a history of extreme political tension.
Well, the province of Almeria is used as a kind of case study, a microcosm where this violent underworld has been playing out with brutal clarity for decades.
The city of Almeria was pretty much the personal playground of two incredibly powerful mobsters. And by all accounts, they acted like they were completely untouchable.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. You have these two major players. On one hand, there's Juan Asensio, the local guy. His public face? Just a humble cinema owner. But behind the scenes, he was allegedly running a vast criminal network. Then you have Giuseppe D'Amico, an Italian with ties to the infamous Camorra Mafia. And what does he do? He builds Europe's biggest nightclub in one of the poorest provinces in Spain. Think about that for a second.
And Senzio's story is just brutal. It shows you how violent this world really was. I mean, he was accused of murdering his own wife and even firebombing a newspaper just because they dared to criticize him. Now, he never got convicted for those things, but he did do time for murdering a brothel owner. But the story doesn't stop there. In 2004, not long after getting out, he was shot dead in the middle of the street. A violent end for a violent man.
But if you think that's wild, the story of the other crime king, D'Amico, is maybe even stranger. That nightclub of his, H2O, was so huge it brought in world-famous singers to this tiny remote province. After it shut down, he just pivoted to owning pubs. But then in 2006, just 2 years after his rival was killed, D'Amico was found in his home brutally tortured and murdered. And to this day, the case has never been solved. So we've got the mobsters, right? But that's not the whole story. Not even close. The evidence suggests that the violence in Almeria wasn't just about money and power. It was being fueled by something else, something much, much darker. This is where organized crime smashes right into a very dangerous ideology.
I want you to remember this year, 2000. It might not seem special, but in Almeria, it was a boiling point, a moment when all those hidden tensions just exploded right out into the open for everyone to see.
Because this was the year of a horrifying racist pogrom. It targeted Muslim immigrants and leftist groups in a wave of violence. It was a huge deal that even got international attention. But what happened next, or, what didn't happen, that's the real story here.
So after all that, what were the immediate legal consequences for these pretty serious crimes? The answer is 0. That's the number. A big, fat 0. And that shocking lack of accountability is really just the start of a much, much longer story about justice being delayed.
And check out this timeline. It's just wild. Years after that pogrom in 2000, some of the ringleaders, who are local politicians, are finally put on trial. But here's the kicker. It wasn't for the violence. It was for a massive corruption scandal called the Poniente case. And just look at these dates. The trial starts in 2008 and doesn't end until 2023. I mean, to say justice was delayed is a massive understatement. So, after more than 2 decades, did justice finally win out? Well, not really. A lot of the charges just got dropped, and the reasons why are astounding. First, the trial took so long that the statute of limitations on the crimes just expired. And second, get this, key evidence was literally stolen from a prosecutor's office. You can't make this stuff up.
But it doesn't stop there. There's another layer to this whole puzzle, a persistent undercurrent of extremism.
This chart really lays out a disturbing pattern. For years, you see a monument dedicated to victims of a Nazi concentration camp getting vandalized over and over. And crickets. No arrests. Then the story starts to shift. In 2020, you get arrests that connect neo-Nazis to drug trafficking, supposedly to fund their hate groups. And by 2023, you see this huge national operation. It's a slow but definitely escalating response from law enforcement.
All of this brings us to a huge question, right? If all of this stuff is really happening, why isn't it a bigger story?
First, you've got a media vacuum. Journalists, apparently, are hesitant to really dig into these complex crimes when they happen far away from the big cities. And then, something powerful fills that vacuum: money. Local businesses and politicians supposedly pump cash into constant positive PR campaigns, which basically buries all the darker stories.
If you have mafia wars, unsolved murders, organized neo-Nazi groups, why isn't this a bigger story? Why don't more people know about this? Why is it all kept in the shadows?
And that leaves us with one last, pretty sobering question. If this analysis is even close to accurate for Almeria, you have to wonder, don't you? What other complex realities, in other places we think we know, are also hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to connect all the dots?
Just this year, in 2024, this violence exploded into the headlines. The brother of a pretty well-known politician, Begoña Villasís, was murdered, and we're talking about a brutal public execution.
And the motive? Police called it a settling of scores between rival neo-Nazi drug gangs. Right there, that tells you everything. You've got this fusion of violent, far-right extremism with the big money drug trade. And this was no isolated incident. It's a pattern.
In this criminal merger, it thrives in a very, very public space: football. The passionate world of Spanish soccer has this really dark side, where these extremist fan groups, the ultras, intersect directly with this criminal underworld.
I mean, the evidence connecting these groups to serious crime is just stark. You have prominent neo-Nazi ultra leaders like Vicente Estruc from Valencia, who was arrested for drug trafficking. You've got Ricardo Guerra from Atletico Madrid, a convicted murderer, also busted for trafficking. Then there's Manuel Herrera, a Betis neo-Nazi, who literally worked for a mafia. At this point, the line between fan and criminal is just gone.
So we've seen the violence, we've seen the ideological ties, but how high up does all this go? Well, now we get to the most shocking part of this whole story, where this hidden world crashes right into mainstream politics and some absolutely staggering hypocrisy. So, let me introduce you to José Luis Roberto. He's the top leader of the fascist political party España 2000. Publicly, he's the face of a very specific set of ultra-conservative values. But an undercover journalist found something pretty astonishing about his professional life.
And here it is, the hypocrisy, just laid bare. Publicly, he's the leader of a reactionary, ultra-Catholic political party. Privately, get this, he is the director of ENELA, which is the Spanish Brothel Association. He has even argued in public for prostitution to be legalized.
See, in the circles he moves in, public appearance is, well, it's everything. This deep-seated idea of maintaining a respectable public image makes his double life not just hypocritical, but a massive betrayal of the very values he claims to stand for.
Let's take Spain's massive prostitution industry. The Romanian mafias control something like 60% of the market, and they use this incredibly cruel tactic known as the lover boy method. They essentially trick young women, many of them underage, into sexual slavery by threatening their families back home. It's just horrific.
There's a powerful and violent criminal element in the country that most people, even many Spaniards, just never see.
So you have to ask, why don't we hear more about this? There are a few big reasons. For one, there's a certain reluctance from some journalists to really dig deep. Then you've got this very vocal online army of trolls, basically ready to pounce on any criticism, and it's all part of this bigger cultural mission to protect that immaculate image, no matter what.
Now, this is where it might connect back to you. Tourists, just on vacation, spending their money, they often have absolutely no clue that they're the final step in washing this dirty money clean. That shiny facade of prosperity in these gorgeous places, a big chunk of it is propped up by illegal cash.
So, what happens when you take all these threads we've been following, the politics, the crime, the extremism, the silence, and you weave them all together? Well, you get our final section, the vicious cycle. This is where the line between the state and organized crime just blurs.
And this is the absolute key takeaway. What we're looking at is a cycle that feeds itself. You have this massive black economy that creates a kind of fake prosperity, right? So on the surface, things look good. But underneath, the lines between the government, extremist groups, and organized crime get so blurry that trying to hold anyone accountable becomes, well, pretty much impossible.
Which leaves us with one last, really unsettling question to think about. When the very institutions that are supposed to uphold the law are tangled up with the people who are breaking it, what even happens to the idea of justice?